Hello, this is Matthew Randall, and welcome to another procedural rendering recipe for Maya. So in this tutorial, what I want to have a look at is how we can kind of take a metal material like this, and okay, this is kind of ridiculously shiny as it is, but how can we actually use procedural rendering to kind of make a metal look a little bit more natural? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and I want to add some dirt to kind of where sort of I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, where the bumps are, where all the indents are in this model. Okay, so I want some dirt to appear there, and what I want to do is I want the metal to kind of be not so uniformly shiny, and also perhaps look a little bit more polished where on the edges of the character. Okay. So let's have a look at how we can do that. So what I've done so far is I've actually already set up two materials. So I've set up a dirt material and a metal material. So I'm just going to select both of those. They're just, sorry, not that one. Sorry, dirt and metal. They're just AI standard surface shaders. So I'm just going to go graph input output connections. Okay, and we can see both of those shaders here. Now, just to make this a little bit easier to see, I'm going to try and create a little bit more space for our graph, so you can kind of see it in a bit more detail, because that's where a lot of things are going to be happening. And okay, and also what we can do is, so I've got this is my metal material, this is my dirt material. I can click on this just to kind of shrink it down and make it a little bit easier to see, or I can kind of click on it just to get the details that I want. All the main details that I'm using. I'm going to click on it again. It'll just kind of moves at different sizes depending on what you've clicked on here. So here we are. So this is our metal material. This is our dirt material. Let's just see if we can kind of rearrange the rest of the graph here just to help us out. That's our bump map. So the bump map's being applied to both materials. I'm just going to put that here, and then on the dirt material, I have got a couple of noises that I've used, okay, on my dirt material. So at the moment, we're looking at our there's this gargoyle normal material that we've applied to both the metal and the dirt. So that's our kind of, it's just a bump map that we've applied to both materials. If I disconnect this and just connect it up to our dirt material, you can see that we've got this sort of dirt material on here, and it looks really black, but actually if you look at it carefully, what you'll see is there's actually a really subtle noise to it. Okay, and that's created using these noise nodes here. If I click on these noise nodes, and what I'm going to do is in the renderer I'm going to click on this button here. This means to kind of solo the node that we have got highlighted in our hypergraph. That wasn't the result I was expecting. Hang on. Yeah, that is working as expected, but my noise is so dark. If you look at the colors here for my noise, if I click on this other noise node, you can see that I've got a little bit more color in here, in this noise node here. So what I might do is with this noise node is just push it up a little bit. Okay, the important thing is I just want a slightly different color, so you can see there's a little bit noise there. One of the things we can do in our render is we can kind of just push up the exposure just to see it if we want to see it. Okay, again, we can just use this. Important just to remember to set it back. So if you press 1, that'll set it back, or I think if you press double click on the exposure, that's it. Yeah, it will reset that for you as well. So important just to remember to reset that. Sorry, it's not 1, it's 0 by default. Again, so we've got these two noises, and we're using a mix shader node here to combine those two noises. Again, I'll just kind of put that out. So it's kind of combining those to create kind of a dirt noise for us. Again, really dark, and it kind of needs to be to serve the purpose that we want. Okay, but some very dark noise. Okay, that dark noise is applied to the base color of our dirt here. Great. So yeah, so we've got a very dark material. And it's also very dark and rough, so it's a very dark matte material, and we've got a very shiny material. And what we want to do is apply this dirty material to where the dirt is. Okay. But before we do that, what I'm going to do is refine this metal material, okay? And what I want is this metal material to give us a specular roughness that isn't just the same specular roughness across the entire model. So we're going to focus on that first, and then what we'll do is have a look at how we can bring this dirt material in. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, I don't think we need to look at all these noise nodes in so much detail, so I'm just going to kind of reduce these down a bit. Again, just clicking on them a couple of times, they just give us the important information that we want. Again, you can always just click on the nodes, you know, to get all the attributes here anyway, so that's not a problem. Okay, great. So it just kind of makes our graph look less cluttered. Great. Okay, so let's have a look at this metal material. So I'm just going to reconnect the surface shader to this metal here, and obviously I need to click on the actual metal material, so we're looking at that. Great. In fact, I might just turn the solo off for a moment. Okay, so this is the metal material. Obviously I need to correct my exposure. There we go, just by clicking on there. Okay, so what I want to do then is rather than this being like a uniform kind of specular roughness, I want it to kind of be non-uniform. So the easiest way to do that is to create a noise node. So I'm just going to go tab AI noise to create a noise node. Okay, so here we've got a noise node, and what I want is just kind of a gentle kind of noise here. So I'm just going to plug that into, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to just plug that straight into the specular roughness. So if I just open up this node here, I can just plug that straight into the specular roughness. Where are you? I think I need to pull out, sorry, a single color rather than all the colors combined, because the roughness is just a single attribute, not a color attribute with RGB values. So it doesn't matter whether I use red, green or blue, but I need to pull one of these color channels out. I can only connect one color channel to that attribute, okay, rather than all three of them. So I've done that. Now I'm just going to close this down just to kind of make it a little bit easy for us to see, because I've connected it how I want. Okay, so you can see that already I'm getting a kind of a non-uniform roughness here, which is great. Just going to pause my render so I can keep working on this. So what I want to do is just have a look at this roughness. In fact, what I can do as well is just close this down as well. Sometimes when you're creating quite a large kind of node hypergraph, it is useful to label these. So you can kind of click on the names and you can kind of go, hey, I don't know. Let's do it again. Quite a good convention I came across on YouTube, and I'm trying to remember his name, but he's quite prominent in terms of doing procedural rendering and things. Was to type in the name of the material, and then the name of the node type that you're doing, and then the name of the attribute that you're connecting it to. Spec R, and use that. So specular roughness, so I'm going to call it spec R. Okay, obviously you've got to shorten these, but then that obviously tells you that this is connecting up to the metal node. This is doing the noise for the specular roughness on the metal node. So it just means that when you're looking at this, you can instantly look at this and know what this node here is tuning. So it's good to kind of follow a naming convention. I don't think I've really done that much in these tutorials. So yeah, when you start getting into this and creating more complex hypershades, it's good to do that. Great. So let's have a look at this noise. What we can do is we can just solo this. So if I click on the solo button, I can just kind of see what this noise looks like on its own. Obviously I need to get the render going again. Obviously what I want is I want the noise to kind of spread across the whole model. So I don't want it to kind of be, yeah, so I probably want to just reduce the larceny, I think is going to do the trick. Yeah, the larceny doesn't seem to be having the impact that I wanted. What I'm trying to do is just make this not the sort of kind of granularity of this not so small. So another approach I can use is just to scale it up, so or scale it down. So by reducing the scale of it, what happens is that the noise will get spread across the model more. There we are. Okay, I might even just go for something more than that. I'm going to go 0.3. There we go. And I don't want it to be kind of, I might actually add a bit of distortion here so it doesn't just look like patches. So try and kind of, yeah, let's have a look. I'm not sure that's quite what I wanted. So the distortion's working, but it's adding kind of even more detail to the noise. So I think it's kind of, it is, I'm just going to try and go for quite a low distortion value. Something like that. But what I might do is actually, again, just increase the scale again. 0.2, maybe even more than that. Maybe that's a bit too dramatic. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's going to be too dramatic. I'm going to go to 0.2. Okay, let's try and see what that looks like. And also, what I don't want to do is go between black and white. So obviously, black would be would have no roughness at all, and white would be 100% roughness. Obviously, I don't want to go between those ranges of values, so I probably want to just kind of go, and I don't want it to be so shiny. I want this to be kind of like a base metal color, so not really highly polished. Remember, I want to have a really highly polished on the kind of sort of more prominent corners of my model here. So so I need some kind of latitude in terms of more shyness that I can go to, okay, to kind of make this sort of procedural model work. So I'm going to go something like that and see what that looks like, okay. Again, I'm just going to go and click on my metal material and see what that looks like on my metal material. And I think that's giving me a result that I want. So it's giving you a more natural effect, and it's not just giving me, you know, a kind of uniform kind of smoothing there. Oh, sorry, roughness. So yeah, we can just again, just going to turn off the solo here. And if I click on this noise, let's just experiment with kind of perhaps widening this ratio a little bit, see if that kind of helps us. Yeah, I think that'll work. So that's our kind of uniform kind of, so that's our kind of base specular color that we've got there. One of the things I might just experiment with is just upping the scale a little bit. So let's just see if I make it a little bit more kind of patchy. Let's have a look. I want to try and avoid fine-tuning things too much in this tutorial, otherwise it will make the tutorial kind of appear longer than it needs to be. Yeah, I think just giving it a little bit more density in the patch, it just gives it a bit more, you can kind of see as slightly more kind of patchy specularity. Great, okay. So that's our kind of starting point for our specular layer. Now what I want to do is make these edges of our model really, really shiny, okay, and really kind of pop out. Imagine it's kind of like where these edges are, they've kind of got polished over the years, so they really kind of pop out and they're a bit more prominent, okay. So how do we kind of extract this information? What we can do is we can use, or how do we extract the edges to apply a texture to? So what we can use is we can use the curvature, the AI curvature node, okay? So what the AI curvature node looks for is it looks for convex curves and concave curves, or both, okay? So obviously convex curves are like outer curves where we want to put our shyness, and the concave curves are kind of inside curves where we want to put our dirt. So we'll also be using this this node, not this, you know, another instance of this node to do the dirt later on in this tutorial. So at the moment we want to focus on the convex, the outer curves, where we've got sharp outer curves to create a to create our kind of shiny hot spots here, if you will. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set up everything that I'm going to use to kind of mix this all together. In fact, actually, no, I'm going to do a slightly different approach. One of the things I find with Maya is if I start connecting it through lots of nodes, math nodes, it doesn't allow me to kind of visualize the result of this of an individual node and solo it here. So what I'm going to do to avoid that, I'm just going to disconnect this specular noise node that we've got here, and I'm just going to connect up sorry, I've got to click on the plus sign. I'm just going to connect up this curvature node here. So I'm just doing this at the moment just to kind of visualize, so I can visualize the results of what I'm getting and how this is working, okay? So what I want to do is I want to click on this. I've got this node highlighted. I'm going to solo it. And hopefully you can see here that what we're doing here is we are seeing, it's highlighting these sort of outer edges here. And if I change this to convex, you'll see that it highlights sort of inner edges. Okay, great. Now, a node that we're not using, but actually does a kind of similar thing, so just for completeness, going to make you aware of it, is something called the ambient occlusion node. Okay, so as you can imagine, with ambient occlusion methods, so I'm just going to remove that. With ambient occlusion methods, the method used to calculate ambient occlusion is similar to kind of calculating concave concave or inner curves. Okay, so I'm just going to disconnect this and just connect this, the color node here, to the specular roughness and solo that, just so that you can kind of see what's going on there. So there you are. So you can see with the ambient occlusion, this is kind of doing a similar thing where you're getting black where you've got these inside curves, darkness where you've got these inside curves, and obviously whiteness where there's lots of light hitting it. Okay, so it's just a different way of getting it's not quite the same information, but it's kind of similar information. But you may find if you were trying to create, say, dirt or a certain effect, that actually this is a better way of going to get to target the kind of areas of the surface that you want to apply a texture to, rather than using the curvature node. So just giving you that for completeness. We're not going to use that today, mainly because if we're going to use this to apply dirt, I'd end up with, this all works really well, but I'd end up with loads of dirt on this wing here, and that's kind of where it's kind of not really working for me in the case of this model. But otherwise, actually, this is a reasonable way to go. You know, you can kind of imagine sort of dirt picking up on these dark areas. So this is a reasonable way to go, and often ambient occlusion node is used in this way. So let's disconnect that. So that's just a discussion point there. Let's go back to our curvature node now. Again, I'm just going to connect that up again. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to refine this curvature node to kind of get the kind of spread and radius that we want. Okay, so I'm just going to focus on radius to start with. Okay, and again, what I'm really trying to do is I want to kind of make it highlight these areas here. Okay, where, you know, these areas here. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to use radius, and then what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to have a look at, I'm going to keep my spread on 1, because I think reducing the spread dramatically, yeah, that kind of moves in the right direction, actually. Let's have a look. I'm going to look at my spread. Let's have a look at using the threshold here. Actually, threshold might be a better way to go. So what I want to do is I think I want this to be kind of a bit more prominent. Okay, so I'm going to go and multiply. I want to multiply this to make this a much kind of stronger effect. And what I want to try and avoid is perhaps this kind of, I want to kind of make this kind of a little bit more even. I think if I go kind of increase the threshold a little bit, this will even things down. And again, I'm just trying to think if I go and look at the radius. So the radius is just going to increase things far too much. So I think what we want to do is just keep that radius, perhaps keep that radius down a little bit. So really what I want to do is just pick out a few areas and make them really, really prominent, okay? Now I just want to have a look at this bias. What I'm hoping this bias is going to do is kind of, yeah, it's going to just bring up, it's just going to bring up more of these, basically like a contrast. It's going to bring up more of these areas and make them kind of a bit more prominent and shiny. That's fine. And then maybe, again, the spread. this is quite a sensitive one, the spread here, but I think the spread is kind of key to making it work. I'm just going to dial in some settings here. 0.9 is too much. 0.93. Okay, that's looking in the right sort of direction. 0.95. Okay, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, so you can see it's kind of pulling out a lot of details here. Okay, and that's fine. What we could also do is, because I'm trying to up the contrast and make this kind of more contrasty to kind of really drive this roughness a little bit more. Another way of doing that, I'm not doing that in this case, but an alternative would be to use a range node. So you could plug this into a range node, and that would allow you to kind of push the contrast up in the range node, and that might be a better way of doing it rather than trying to do it all within this curvature node. Okay, so let's see what this looks like in terms of our roughness now. Okay. In fact, I'm going to just turn this off. So what you may notice is actually the areas that we want to be, it's basically doing the opposite effect. The areas that we want to be shiny are dull, and the areas that we want to be dull are shiny. And you may have already picked up on this if you were looking carefully. Again, if I solo this and go back into my curvature node, obviously remember the dark areas in our specular roughness, that means it's zero roughness, will be the shiny areas, and the light areas are where are going to be the areas which are going to be rough. So we actually want to invert this image basically. So we could do this just using a math node. So I'm just going to go. I'm just going to put in float math. Okay. So this is just a math node here, and I could pick an operation here. And what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to set float A to 1. I'm going to set this to a subtract. Basically, I'm going to subtract float B. Okay, so I'm going to put this input into float B and subtract this value from 1. So this should invert it. Okay, let's put that together and then put the output, connect the output up. Okay, and then hopefully what we will see, yeah, so there you are. You can see it's inverted those values. Okay, and let's see what that looks like on the final output. So hopefully now you can kind of see, yes, this is giving us the result that we were expecting. Okay. Now, it's not giving us a whole lot of shininess, so what I might do is actually just kind of multiply this up in the curvature node a little bit. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm just going to go into the curvature node, and if I solo this, yeah, so what happens is, for some reason, once I connect like a math node between this curvature node and the metal node, if someone knows how to resolve this, put it in the comments, okay? But once I put a math node in here, I can no longer solo this curvature node, which is a little bit frustrating. But anyway, let's just click on the metal material, and what I'm going to do is take it out of solo mode, click on this curvature node, and I'm just going to see if I can do something with the multiply just to kind of make this a little bit more prominent. So let's have a look. So I'm hoping that the multiply will actually give us more kind of a white area, and maybe increasing the spread might work as well. Let's have a look. That does seem to have more of a result, actually increasing the spread. Let's try that out. Let's just set the spread back to 1. Okay, so that does seem to be having the result that we want there, just increasing the spread a little bit, okay? So again, it's important to kind of see what effect all these nodes are having on your final output. Great. So what we're going to do now is what we want to do then is combine this. So combine the values that we're getting from this curvature node with the kind of noise node to kind of create an overall specular roughness. Okay, so I'm just going to stop the render. And what we want to do is we want to bring in, to combine it, we're going to use, so I might just put these both on top of each other there, or in fact, actually, it might make more sense just to put those on top of each other here. Okay, and I'm going to go put in another node, so we're going to use a float composite node. I'm just going to connect those up. Oh, sorry. I do want to just grab, I'm going to need to grab the red channel. Again, I could grab any color channel, just working with the red channel there. Let's just reduce that down. Okay, so that's the red channel connected, and then I'm going to connect the output of this into the float here, and then the output of the float back into our specular roughness. Yeah, that's all good. What if I set this float node to? So I'm going to use the add operation. Let's just see what the result of that looks like for the moment. So I'm trying to think whether to use the add or the blend operation. Which one's going to give me the sort of most natural results here? Okay, so that's our add operation. And that's looking quite good combined. Okay, let's try, although a little bit kind of rough here. And then I think the other option we have for our blend is to multiply. See what happens there. So really looking at either adding or multiplying. You could blend it with the screen thing, but that kind of just flattens everything. So yeah, I think you're really looking at add or multiply. I quite like the result at the moment of the multiply. Okay, I think that's looking really good. Okay, so we're going to stick with multiply. So it's giving us the you can see we've got our kind of nice specular roughness here, and it's giving us these highlights on these areas, on the outer areas here. So hopefully you can kind of see it's giving our kind of metal a little bit more texture. Okay, on to the next bit now. So now that we've got our kind of specular roughness tuned on this metal here, what we want to do is bring in our dirt. Okay, so we're going to do that by using a well, first of all, we need to bring in another curvature node. So I'm just going to go curvature. And again, what I might do is just use this with a range node, just to demonstrate the fact that, you know, an ideal way of using this is to combine it with a range node. So again, you can get the curvature values out of this node, and then this just allows you to kind of adjust what the range of those values look like. You know, make it more contrasty or stretch the ranges out as required. So it just gives you a bit more flexibility combining these two nodes rather than just using the curvature node in terms of trying to define the sort of grayscale values you want for the mixing. Okay, great. So I'm just going to select an out color. In fact, actually, I can just plug the entire color range in there, so I don't need to worry about that at this stage. That's great. Okay, and what I want to do is, at the moment, I can't visualize this. So in order to visualize this, I need to plug this into something. So what I'm going to do is plug this into just being arbitrary here. I could plug it in anywhere, but I've got it available. So just to visualize this and so that I can see it, I'm going to plug the output of this into our specular roughness. Okay, again, this isn't how I'm going to the final node. This is just so that I can kind of see what this looks like. Okay. In fact, actually, no, rather than do that, let's just set up the whole structure. I think that's going to be a better way of doing it. Let's do that. I'm just going to turn off this render so things will run a bit more smoothly. So to combine the metal and dirt, I'm just going to use a mix shader node. Okay, so mixed shader node. Here we go. Okay, this is a really useful node because it allows us to take two shaders that we've developed and actually mix them together. So again, this is a really useful technique. So where I've got my dirt shader, so this could be like a paint shader or it could be a rust shader. In this case, I've got it as a dirt shader, and we're talking about like black dirt here, but you could use it for like a sandy dirt. But you can imagine that for any kind of material, any kind of model where you're trying to combine different sort of types of material like rust or paint or bare metal onto a model. You can obviously create those materials using the AI, each of those materials using the AI standard surface shader, and then obviously use this mix shader to combine these where you want them based on a mask that goes into this mix node. Okay, so let's plug the shaders in. So we're going to plug the shader into here, shader 1, shader 2. Okay, the mix is going to be determined by this curvature node that we've got here, and then the output of this is going to go. We don't actually want this mix shader output here. We're going to use the AI standard surface shader output. So let's click on that. Okay, so now hopefully I can visualize what the results are, what we're getting from these nodes here. Let's have a look what we've got. So hopefully if I click on solo, I need to select my render. Here we are. So you click on solo, I can see what we're getting from our curvature node here. Great. Now what I want to do is I want to set this to concave because I want it's the inner bits that I want. Okay, let's have a look at kind of increasing the radius a bit because I want to kind of pull out some different areas and kind of really multiply that. Okay, so let's see what that looks like on our shader. And then what we want to do is in my mix node, what I'm doing is I'm doing a blend, and the blend will be based on our materials. Now I just want to check that I've plugged them in the right way. I think I actually have plugged them in the right way because I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing there. So I think so where this shader is, let's have a look. In fact, has it plugged it in the right way? What I'm trying to remember here is which shader is mixed. So you imagine we're feeding in here a black and white mask here. Which shader is represented by the white and which shader is represented by the black? Okay, so I think I'm just going to go with this idea that the metal is the white area and the dirt is the black area, and if that's the case we want to actually swap those shaders over. Okay, so I'm just assuming that this shader 1 is the white area and shader 2 is the black area. I should really check the documentation to find out, but I'm being lazy. Okay, let's have a look here. So that is definitely not the output that we want. So that's definitely going the wrong way. Okay, fine. So we know that we shouldn't be plugging the shaders in that way. We should be plugging them in this way. Okay, great. Okay. Excellent. So I'm just going to leave that to render just so we can have a look and see what that looks like. One of the things I'm kind of not liking is this kind of mottledness on there, and I think where that's coming from, if I click on the metal node, I think that's just coming from this seems to be coming from the actual metal node rather than the dirt node. So really what I want to do is, and I think that's coming from the noise node that we've got for our specularity here. So I'm just going to click on there. Again, I can't really see it through there, so what I'm going to do is I will just unsolo it. Okay. Although it does appear to be less prominent actually once you take away the solo and put it all together. So actually I'm kind of less worried about it, I think. Just going to pause the render and see what we've got. Yeah, that mottleness seems to be less prominent once I actually take the solo off. So I'm less worried about that. But yeah, when I turn the solo on, it did seem to be quite prominent. But it seems to be when the rest of the scene's on, it seems to work out quite nicely. So I'm going to leave that. So that black's kind of working out quite well. I'm just wondering whether we want to just kind of make it a little bit more, the dirt a little bit more prominent than it is at the moment. But you can see it just in the eyes and on the ears. Again, if I just take away the dirt shader, in fact, actually, I don't need to take away the dirt shader. If I just click on the metal shader here, you can kind of see, hopefully, you can kind of see where the dirt is coming in on this a little bit more. Yeah, it is quite subtle. So let's just make that dirt a little bit more prominent. So what I'm going to do is solo it. Let's look at this curvature node. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at this range node here and see what we can do. So I think I can just sort of push up the gain. It seems like an obvious thing to do. Obviously not that far. So 0.8. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go a different route on this because I don't think the gain is really having much effect. And I think the gain is really a product of the contrast. So unless you're doing anything with the contrast, the gain isn't really going to do a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the gain to 0.5. So it's the original values again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the output max. So I'm kind of going to go beyond the range that we should go. So I'm going to push it to 2 just to make everything much brighter and whiter, okay? And then what I'm going to do is push up the contrast as well. So hopefully this sort of more high contrast area is going to give kind of more sort of clearer dirt areas that we can look at here. And hopefully, yeah, we can kind of see that having a result there. So we've got these clearer dirt areas that are being created here. Now, coming back into this, I'm wondering whether if I affect the threshold, see if it kind of, the radius, I'm just going to reduce the radius a little bit. What I'm hoping is if I reduce the radius a little bit, it might pick out some more areas to add the dirt to, so you can kind of see that it's doing that. Let's just try and find a balance to that. See if that looks, where things look right. Yeah, so by reducing the radius, it's just picking out more areas to apply the dirt to. So we're going to use that, and we're going to go back to our... again, I'm just wondering what threshold will help us a little bit. I think I'm going to leave that threshold onto 0. It's not really having an impact there. So let's go back to our range and see what that looks like on our range output. Again, that's kind of working well. It's upping the contrast a little bit. I think what I'm finding though is a lot of these detail areas seem to be disappearing, and I think, is that the contrast that's doing that? I might just reset the contrast. Yeah, so I think I need to kind of be careful with the contrast a little bit. Let's just push up this maximum output a little bit and just stick with that. Okay, let's see what that's doing. So hopefully that's now going to add a little bit more prominently and into a few kind of more areas as well. And in fact, what I'm going to do is just turn off the solo here. And I shall pause while that renders. So hopefully you can kind of see, yeah, we've got the dirt is a bit more prominent there, and it's picking up in some more areas as well. So hopefully you can kind of see, obviously we could fine tune this even more if we wanted to, but generally the main sort of basis of this tutorial is this wider kind of approach that we've been using to be able to mix shaders to kind of combine, we could use to combine dirt, rust, paint, and this idea of using this curvature node to kind of highlight or pick out the areas that we want to apply the different shaders to, okay, in terms of like sort of outer curves and inner curves, okay. Yeah, and also using this range node to kind of refine the range of those values as well. So hopefully this is giving you some real ideas of things that you could do with your shaders to kind of make them look more natural, or kind of create nice sort of weathered effects where the edges are kind of scuffed or the edges are kind of worn or shiny or whatever effect you want to create. Okay, thank you for watching.